My name is Katie Wisniewski. Welcome to Bicentennial Capitol Mall State Park, and today I wanted to talk about the history of the women's suffrage movement. With the centennial of the ratification of the 19th Amendment approaching, I want to look back on the 70-year struggle that it took to get here. All the way back in 1840, two women who would be considered suffrage champions were barred from an anti-slavery convention in London. This actually prompts them to hold a women's rights convention in the United States. In 1847, Susan B. Anthony gave her first public speech speaking out for women's rights. And in 1848, the first women's rights convention was held in Seneca Falls, New York. At this Seneca Falls convention in 1848, 68 women and 32 men get together to sign the Declaration of Resolution and Sentiments. This was putting forth the agenda for the women's rights movement. In 1850, the first National Women's Rights Convention is held, and over 1,000 participants travel to Massachusetts for it. Among those are Frederick Douglass and Sojourner Truth. From here until 1860, there will be a National Women's Rights Convention every year. In 1851, Sojourner Truth delivers her famous "Ain't I a Woman" speech, calling for women's equal rights not only for white women, but also women of color. In 1866, Elizabeth Cady Stanton and Susan B. Anthony formed the American Equal Rights Association. Their mission is suffrage for all, regardless of gender or race. In 1866, Tennessee was the first state restored to the Union after they ratified the 14th Amendment. This amendment states that all citizens born in the United States are citizens of the United States. However, in this amendment, citizens are defined as male. In 1876, Susan B. Anthony and others disrupt a centennial event in Philadelphia by presenting the Declaration of Rights for Women, written by Elizabeth Cady Stanton. And Susan B. Anthony actually gets up and reads a speech aloud at this event. In 1878, 30 years after the first Women's Rights Convention in Seneca Falls, the first Women's Suffrage Amendment is proposed to the United States Congress. In 1886, the Susan B. Anthony Amendment on women's suffrage is debated on the United States Senate floor. While in 1887, it was actually voted on and defeated. By 1900, we are seeing more women become invested in the movement. People like Susan B. Anthony are making way for people like Carrie Chapman Catt to come in and start other women's suffrage organizations. In 1909, the Women's Suffrage Party is founded in New York City by Carrie Chapman Catt, and that paves the way in 1910 for the first women's suffrage parade held for equal rights. In 1915, there was another suffrage parade in New York City that welcomed over 40,000 participants. Women came from all across the United States and often carried signs representing which state they were from. As women become more involved in World War I, they're gaining new skills. They're becoming more interested in politics and suffrage. Finally, after 70 long years, Tennessee becomes the final state to ratify the amendment. Tennessee ratifying the amendment in 1920 gave the 2/3 majority needed for the amendment to be ratified federally. This gave millions of women all across the United States the opportunity to vote. Thank you for coming and learning about this incredible piece of history as we celebrate the centennial of the women's suffrage movement.